Well, here we are, Monday, May 28th, 2023. It's Memorial Day. Hope you've had a good Memorial Day. My family and I have. We went to the local Memorial Day parade this morning. But it's also that time of year when I feel like I'm ready to assess what is happening in Major League Baseball, in particular with our Philadelphia Phillies. It's not so early in the season that you really can't make much of what's happening. It's still relatively early. It's not too late if your team isn't where you want your team to be. But I think we can say that we kind of know who the definite contenders are, and we kind of know who's way out of it. And our Phils are in a large group of teams that are kind of in the middle of the pack. Now, what I'd like to do is just offer you my big picture thoughts, but I'm going to start with just last night's game as a springboard. Now, the Phillies did take 2 out of 4. They split the series on the road in Atlanta. The first place Atlanta Braves, which was, key. I think if you asked Phillies before the series if they took 2 out of 4, would they be satisfied? I would think, okay, we'd like to, do even better than that, but they held their own. Which keeps them afloat, and they need to hold their own as they go to New York to play the Mets for a 3-game series, and then 3 more games in Washington against the Nationals. But last night's game epitomizes a problem for the Phillies, namely the 5th man in their starting rotation. Before last night's game even started, I checked to see who was pitching. I didn't even recognize who it was. Dylan somebody. And I think he's like 30 years old. Sounds like a journeyman. Couldn't really find many major league stats for him. I think he's been on the fringe of the big leagues. Maybe has pitched at the big league level here or there. But him going up against Spencer Strider, it didn't look good. It felt like all the odds were stacked against the Phillies. And so sure enough, he gives up a touchdown. It was almost like a football game. 2 outs in the first inning. They're already down 7-0. And the game was, for all intents and purposes, over. High improbability of any comeback. Even in the first inning. But that's the issue for the Phillies. And that's what I want to start with in terms of outlining the big picture. Phillies are not out of it. But one thing that needs to round into shape is their starting pitching. Really, if you look at the Phillies, it's been a disappointing season so far, and you really can't point to anything that they do that is a strong point. What do they do well? Starting pitching has been underwhelming. The bullpen has been okay. I'll give the bullpen an okay grade. But base running, miscues, getting picked off, can't happen. And then in the field, their defense has been spotty to say the least. But let's just start with the starting pitching. I think that's going to be the biggest thing that they need to turn around if they're going to work their way back into wild card contention, let's say. And the 5th starter, that's a hole. That's a void they need to fill. And I think Dave Dombrowski, he's going to have to pull the string and maybe trade for a half decent starting pitcher. I don't think they have anyone at the minor league level who's uh, ready to contribute in that way. They started with Bailey Falter, and he lived up to his name. He faltered, and this guy they threw out there last night. Uh, Obviously, he didn't do any better. He was exponentially worse. Andrew Painter, who knows? Maybe we'll see something of him later in the year, maybe August. If you're looking for news on Andrew Painter, lots of luck. It's like top secret. It's like they don't want to shed much light on the situation, but they keep talking about August. Maybe fairly late in the season we'll possibly, maybe just maybe, see something of Andrew Painter, the young phenom who they're really being careful with in light of the injury, which is reasonable, understandable. But I don't think we should be looking at him as some sort of savior. So, yeah, they might need to go outside the organization and pull the trigger on a trade, because you can't do that. You can't every fifth day basically be close to conceding the game. That's how it is. I get it that your fifth starter is usually it's not usually, he's always going to be the weak link in your rotation, over the course of time. But usually it's someone serviceable who can give you maybe 5 innings, keep the team in the game. That's what you're looking for, especially if you're going to be a winning team. You're going to have a fifth starter who can at least do that for you. So that's a really obvious hole that they need to fill. But the rest of the rotation has been nothing to write home about. Zach Wheeler was excellent on Saturday, but he has yet to be consistent. Same with Aaron Nola. He was outstanding 2 starts ago, but I think it was last Thursday. He gave up 5 runs in 5 innings. He was lackluster. He didn't give you what you needed. Now the third starter that they signed in the offseason, whose name I always forget. Even to the point that now I have to look it up. But highly touted free agent signing. And he has been, for the most part, awful. Taijuan Walker. Taijuan Walker has been catastrophic. Now, last 2 starts, he's been better. But overall, he has not earned his contract. Not even close. And then you've got Ranger Suarez, who got hurt in the World Baseball Classic and basically didn't have a spring training. He's in spring training. He's pitching big league games for the Phillies, but he's in spring training mode. And that just goes to show you, that just highlights for you how thin their rotation is, how much they lack depth, how desperate they are that they have to run Ranger out there when he's probably not really ready. Now, he's eventually, I believe, going to round into form. I think all these guys, the 4 mainstays in the rotation, are going to improve. They're going to get better, and we need them to progress and be reliable, consistent. Part of the problem, I would just guess, is that guys like Wheeler and Nola, they were not accustomed to pitching deep into the fall, into October. It might have even been November, just about November, when they lost Game 6 to the Astros. And so they had less of an offseason and probably were not as ready to bounce back and be as strong coming out of spring training. They're going to need to learn to deal with that, overcome that. But I do think the starters will improve. Cautiously optimistic, and it would really help if they could pencil in somewhat reliable fifth starter. As I said before, I think the bullpen is okay. I think Gregory Soto, again another highly touted free agent signing. He has not been that great. He's Jekyll and Hyde. Dominguez, Sir Anthony, has not been himself. I think he's slowly getting back to being the best version of himself. And of course, the best reliever this year so far has been Jose Alvarado. He's on the injured list. Hopefully, he'll be back soon. Craig Kimbrell gives you a veteran presence at the back end of the bullpen, which is helpful. But like I said before, I'm not going to go on and on about the bullpen. I think they've been okay. And things like base running and just making fundamentally sound decisions, being alert on the base paths, getting the running game going. They've got speed at the top of the order now that they have Trey Turner. One would think that that area of their play should straighten out, and hopefully the defense can be adequate. I know that when Bryce Harper begins playing first base, that's the plan, maybe after the All-Star break, it will enable Kyle Schwarber to DH and get him out of left field where he is a downright liability. But then who's going to play left field? You could move Castellanos over to left, but then who's going to play right? So not sure what that's going to look like. But I believe that the defense can be adequate. And then, I haven't really talked about it yet. I haven't even mentioned it, but the hitting, the offense has not been what we perhaps expected. And the culprit seems to be the team's inability to hit with runners in scoring position. Schwarber is batting 160 something. He's still hitting home runs. I'm not that concerned about him. I think he'll the average will rise as the season continues, and as long as he's driving the ball, hitting the long ball, and producing runs, that's really all you want out of him. The young players have been encouraging, promising. The way they've been hitting, Stott, Bohm, Marsh. Overall, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Castellanos is more like himself this year, as opposed to last year when supposedly he was just out of sorts, adjusting to a new team, a new city, along with his family. I expect JT Realmuto to hit more like JT Realmuto as the season unfolds. So I see grounds for being hopeful here. That starting pitching has really got around into form. I think that is the main thing. We need a fifth starter. But I think just based on track record, I'm relatively confident that the rest of their play will improve. Having said that, though, the body of work so far is not very inspiring, and I'm not as confident as I'd like to be. So this stretch of games they're in, really, I would say between now and the All-Star break, it's critical that they at least stay relevant and within striking distance. And I'm not even talking about catching the Atlanta Braves. Um, I'm talking about just being in wild card contention. Let's just be realistic. Um, Atlanta doesn't have a huge lead, but it's a significant lead, and they are at a 100 win clip. That's the rate at which they're playing right now, as usual. So I'm thinking more along the lines of wild card contention. Um, so I've been thinking about this, and I vacillate. Sometimes I really get disgusted with how the Phillies have played. And I think about diehard fans like my mother. Um, every time I see her, she's wearing Phillies gear, and every time they do anything good, she's so excited, and she is on the bandwagon. And for the sake of people like her, for the sake of a very loyal fan base, um, I think the Phillies owe it to everyone to step it up. But on the other hand, it kind of makes sense their performance so far, and I think the manager Rob Thompson stays on a fairly even keel and keeps everyone relaxed, which I think is the right kind of approach for these players. Certainly paid off last year. And yeah, I think there's reason to not overreact. And here's what I'm getting at. It was amazing. It was a thrill. The World Series run. They didn't win it, but they got to the series. The playoff, the deep playoff run the Phillies had last year. It was a wonderfully pleasant surprise, and it's got everyone excited and elevated everyone's expectations going into this season, especially when you add Trey Turner and some other key free agent signings. And I think there was even an expectation that they could maybe win the division and battle it out with the Braves and the Mets. And like the Mets, however, the Phillies are significantly behind, and the Mets are at 500, the Phillies are just under 500, and the Mets have had their issues, their setbacks, injuries, but the same with the Phillies. And I think if we're really honest, I think now we can evaluate and say it's pretty safe to say that last year's team was a borderline playoff team. I mean, if it was a year earlier, they wouldn't have made the playoffs. There weren't 3 wild cards in 2021 like there were starting in 2022. And the Phillies were the 3rd wild card. They snuck in there. And then they caught lightning in a bottle. They got hot at the right time. I think they caught teams at the right time, like the Braves when Strider was coming off the injury. I think that series turned in Game 3 when they lit up Spencer Strider, who basically just mowed the Phillies down all throughout last regular season. So what I'm saying is that I don't think the Phillies were this juggernaut or should have been considered anything like a juggernaut. Atlanta is a juggernaut. The Dodgers are a juggernaut. The Astros, I guess this year you got to put the Rays in that category. But the Phillies are like a lot of teams. They need things to break right. They can't just have injury after injury. In order for them to win and at least be in playoff contention. And not much has gone right for the Phillies so far this year. They had the Rhys Hoskins injury. That is a hole in their lineup. That is something that has hindered the offensive output. They not only had Andrew Painter go down, but Suarez, now Alvarado is on the injured list. And of course, we all knew that Bryce Harper was not going to start the season. And way ahead of schedule, he's back. But all of these things have conspired to kind of set us up for this. A slow start. Not a disastrous start because, they're still kind of staying afloat. And I think what they need to do is stay afloat. They need to at least break even through this long road trip against divisional teams. So far, so good. 2 out of 4 in Atlanta. And I think they need to pick it up when they come home after this trip. And I think that between now and the All-Star break, they need to climb over 500 and kind of creep up the standings and get close to playoff position. And hopefully, like I said, they could make a move. They could add a starter. Other things could be done between now and the trade deadline. Hopefully, they can round into form, starting with the starting pitching, and they can make their move. Baseball is a marathon, and we're not even 1/3 there, but we are far along enough. It's Memorial Day. That it's time for the serious fan to say, okay, we kind of know what the circumstances are. A month ago, the Pittsburgh Pirates looked like world beaters. They were like 15 games over 500. Now they have a losing record. But at this point, we kind of know who teams are. Again, who are the surefire contenders, who are way out of it. And then you've got again, this big clump of teams in the middle, and that's where the Phillies are. And they've got to get to the head of the pack. So I am not giving up. Let's go Phillies. I look forward to offering commentary as the season goes on, as the season continues. So maybe you'll hear from me again after the New York Mets series. But with that, have a happy rest of your Memorial Day, and I will sign off.